I ran away from my husband with nothing but a canvas bag and the ache of a decision that had been years in the making. The bus station smelled like diesel and burned coffee, a place where people didn't ask questions because everyone there was already leaving something behind. I kept my head down, hair pulled tight, heart knocking so loudly I was certain the ticket clerk could hear it. When the bus door hissed open, I stepped inside like I was stepping out of my life. I chose a seat near the middle, not too close to the driver, not too close to the back. A seat that wouldn't remember me. The bus lurched forward, and the city slid past in blurred streaks of gray and yellow. I told myself not to look back, but my eyes betrayed me, tracking reflections in the window as if my husband might materialize in the glass, arm raised, mouth already forming the words he always used when I tried to leave a room before he was done speaking. I pressed my palm to the window. It was cold. Real. I was still here. The argument that morning replayed itself without mercy. It always started small, coffee too weak, a shirt not ironed right, and ended the same way, with me apologizing for things I hadn't done, promising to be better at things I didn't believe were wrong. I hadn't planned to run. I'd planned to survive another day. But something had snapped when he said my name like it was an insult, like it was something he could use against me. I grabbed the bag I'd packed in secret months ago, the one I kept hidden behind winter coats, and I left before courage could evaporate. The bus filled with people. A man with headphones and restless legs. A mother with a sleeping child drooping against her shoulder. A woman in a neat suit whose eyes were already closed, like she'd learned how to disappear in plain sight. I counted breaths, counted mile markers, counted the ways my life could go wrong from here. That's when the old woman boarded. She moved slowly, as if gravity had increased just for her. Her hair was a cloud of silver pinned into a bun that refused to be neat. She wore a long brown coat that looked older than me, the sleeves frayed, the buttons mismatched. She didn't look at anyone as she made her way down the aisle, her eyes fixed somewhere far beyond the bus walls, like she was seeing a different road entirely. She stopped beside my seat. For a moment, I thought she was asking me to move. I shifted my bag, preparing to stand. But she didn't speak. She just looked at me. Not at my face exactly, but at the space around it, the way doctors do when they're about to deliver news that will change everything. Then she leaned in close enough that I could smell lavender and something older, something like dust and rain. She whispered 3 words. "You already died." My body reacted before my mind could. Every muscle locked. My breath snagged in my throat like it had hit a wall. The bus noise fell away, replaced by a rushing sound in my ears. I stared at her, waiting for the punchline, the clarification, the apology. She straightened, shuffled past me, and took the seat across the aisle like nothing had happened. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I didn't blink. "You already died." People say words can't hurt you. They're wrong. Some words slip into the cracks you didn't know were there and pry them open. Those 3 words crawled under my skin and stayed there, pulsing in time with my heart. I told myself she was confused. Old. Mistaken. Maybe she'd meant someone else. Maybe she was talking to herself. But her eyes, clear, sharp, terrifyingly aware, said otherwise. I stared straight ahead, afraid that if I turned my head, I'd see something I couldn't unsee. The road unspooled before us, miles of trees and low buildings, and the promise of somewhere else. I tried to anchor myself in the present. The seat beneath me, the hum of the engine, the weight of my bag. But my thoughts had already slipped backward. I thought about the first time my husband had made me feel invisible. We were at a party, and he'd introduced me by the wrong name. When I corrected him, laughing it off, he'd squeezed my hand hard enough to bruise and whispered that I was embarrassing him. Later, at home, he told me I was too sensitive, that I imagined things, that I should be grateful he put up with me at all. I thought about the way my world had shrunk without me noticing. Friends I stopped calling because he didn't like them. Clothes I stopped wearing because they drew comments. Dreams I folded away neatly because they were impractical, childish, selfish. I thought about the night I stood in the bathroom, staring at my reflection, trying to remember the last time I'd felt like a person instead of a problem. You already died. The bus hit a pothole, jolting me back into my body. My heart pounded. I glanced across the aisle. The old woman sat with her hands folded in her lap, eyes closed, lips moving silently like she was counting something only she could see. I wanted to confront her, demand an explanation, but fear glued me to my seat. There was a gravity to her presence, a sense that whatever she'd said wasn't meant to be argued with. Minutes passed, or hours. Time became slippery. At the next stop, a few people got off. New ones got on. The old woman opened her eyes and looked at me again, this time with something like pity. I couldn't stand it anymore. What did you mean? The words came out rough, scraped raw by panic.
What you said to me.
She tilted her head, studying me the way you study a photograph you don't remember taking. You heard me. That doesn't make sense, I said. My hands trembled in my lap. I'm right here. She smiled, but it wasn't kind.
So was I.
Once. A laugh bubbled up, sharp and hysterical. You're saying I'm a ghost? I'm saying, she replied softly, that there are worse deaths than the kind people bury. The bus roared on. Outside, the landscape changed, fields giving way to woods, woods to water. The world kept moving, indifferent to the conversation unraveling my sanity. I didn't die, I said, more to myself than to her. I ran away. She nodded. That's usually when people notice. I swallowed. Notice what? That they've been gone a long time. Her words slid into me with awful precision. Images flashed, me nodding along to conversations I wasn't part of, smiling on cue, shrinking to fit into spaces where I wasn't welcome. Moments I dismissed as stress, as marriage, as adulthood. A slow erosion I'd mistaken for normal. You don't know me, I said, but my voice lacked conviction. I know you better than you think, she said. I know the look in your eyes. The way you hold your breath like you're waiting for permission to exist. Anger flared, hot and sudden. You're wrong. She leaned back, unbothered. Then you have nothing to fear from what I'll say next. My stomach dropped. What's that? She met my gaze, and for the first time, I saw something like urgency there. If you don't choose differently now, you'll finish what already started. The bus slowed as we approached another stop. My pulse thudded painfully. Choose what? But the doors opened with a pneumatic sigh, and she stood, gathering her coat around her like armor. Your life, she said, stepping into the aisle. This time consciously. She walked off the bus without looking back. The doors closed. The bus pulled away. And I sat there, shaking, with 3 words echoing in my head and a terrible understanding blooming in my chest. Maybe I hadn't died, but I had been disappearing. For the rest of the ride, I watched the road like it might answer me. Memories surfaced uninvited, aligning themselves into a pattern I could no longer ignore. Every compromise that cost me a piece of myself. Every silence that taught my husband he could speak for me. Every time I told myself it wasn't that bad. By the time the bus reached my stop, a small town I'd chosen at random because it was far enough, I felt like I was stepping out of a dream I'd been trapped in for years. I stood, legs unsteady, and walked down the aisle. For a split second, I expected the old woman to be there again, blocking my path. She wasn't. Outside, the air was crisp and sharp. I breathed deeply, like I was testing new lungs. The town was quiet, ordinary, the kind of place where nothing dramatic was supposed to happen. But my hands were still shaking, my heart still racing. You already died. I looked down at myself. At my hands. At the ring I hadn't taken off yet. No, I whispered to the empty street. Not yet. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't know who I was without the life I'd fled. But for the first time in years, the fear was tangled with something else.
Possibility.
And somewhere deep inside, a voice I barely recognized began to stir, asking a dangerous, hopeful question. What if she was wrong? Or worse, what if she was right, and this was my second chance? I found a cheap motel on the edge of town, the kind with flickering vacancy signs and curtains that never quite closed. The room smelled faintly of bleach and old carpet, but it was mine. I locked the door, slid down against it, and cried until my chest hurt. Not the quiet, polite crying I'd mastered over the years, but loud, shaking sobs that left me gasping. Grief poured out of me, for the life I'd lived, for the woman I'd been before it all narrowed, for the years I couldn't get back. When the tears dried, exhaustion took over. I slept in my clothes, curled around my bag like it might disappear if I let go. I dreamed of the old woman. She stood at the end of a long hallway lined with doors, each one marked with a date. She pointed to one in the middle, its paint peeling, its handle rusted. "That's where you stopped," she said. I woke with a jolt, heart racing, the echo of her voice lingering like a bruise. Morning light crept through the thin curtains. For a moment, I forgot where I was and panic surged until memory snapped into place.
The bus.
The whisper.
The choice.
My phone buzzed on the bedside table. His name lit up the screen. I stared at it, a familiar dread coiling in my stomach. He must have noticed I was gone. The missed calls stacked up, each one a reminder of the gravity I'd escaped. I imagined his messages without opening them, confusion turning to anger, turning to accusation. I turned the phone face down. In the silence, I noticed how loud my own breathing was. How strange it felt to make a decision without bracing for fallout. I showered, letting hot water pound my shoulders like it could knock something loose. As steam filled the room, I caught my reflection in the fogged mirror, eyes red, face drawn, but unmistakably present. "You're here," I told myself. "You're still here." I spent the day walking the town, getting lost on purpose. There was a library with big windows and a cafe that smelled like cinnamon. I sat on a bench by the river and watched the water slide past, relentless and free. Every small choice felt monumental: coffee or tea, left or right, stay or go. By afternoon, my phone buzzed again. A text this time.
"Come home. We need to talk."
I laughed, a short, incredulous sound. We always needed to talk, but it was never a conversation. It was a verdict. Another message followed. "You're being dramatic. This isn't you." The words hit harder than I expected. Because for years, he'd been right. The version of me that existed with him was small, cautious, compliant. That wasn't me, or at least it hadn't been once. "I'm worried," he added, the closest he ever came to tenderness. "You can't survive on your own." I thought of the old woman's eyes, sharp and knowing. "You already died." Maybe survival wasn't the point. That night, I dreamed again. This time, I was on the bus, but the seats were empty. The old woman sat beside me instead of across the aisle. She took my hand, her grip surprisingly strong. "Why me?" I asked her. "Because you listened," she said. "Most people don't." When I woke, I felt calmer than I had in years. The fear was still there, but it had shifted, making room for resolve. Days turned into a week. I found temporary work at a bookstore, my fingers aching pleasantly from unpacking boxes, my mind buzzing with the quiet joy of being useful on my own terms. I rented a small room above a bakery, waking each morning to the smell of bread and the sound of delivery trucks. I didn't answer my husband's calls. When the voicemail messages grew uglier, I saved them. When they softened again, promising change, I saved those too. I needed proof, not for anyone else but for myself, that the cycle was real. One evening, as I locked up the bookstore, I saw her. The old woman stood across the street, watching me. My heart skipped. "You," I breathed, crossing toward her. "You were right." She smiled, and this time it reached her eyes. "I know. Who are you?" I asked. "How did you know?" She shrugged. "I've lived many lives. I recognize the signs." I hesitated. "Are you like me? Did you run too?" She looked past me, down the street where lights flickered on one by one. I stayed too long. The admission carried weight. Regret. Warning. "What happens now?" I asked. "That depends," she said gently, "on whether you keep choosing yourself when it's inconvenient." I thought about the days ahead, the legal battles, the loneliness, the moments of doubt when it would be easier to go back and pretend nothing had changed. I'm scared, I admitted. Good, she said. Fear means you're alive. With that, she turned and walked away, blending into the evening like she'd never been there at all. I never saw her again, but her words stayed with me as I filed paperwork, as I built a life piece by piece, as I learned to trust my own voice. There were setbacks, nights when I cried into my pillow, missing the familiar even when it hurt, mornings when the future felt too big. Each time, I asked myself the same question. Am I choosing life? Months later, on another bus, heading somewhere I'd chosen deliberately, I caught my reflection in the window. I looked older, stronger, more real. I thought of the woman I'd been, the one who ran with a bag and a breaking heart, and I felt a surge of gratitude. She'd been brave when it mattered. I wasn't dead. I was finally, painfully, gloriously alive. And if this story stirred something in you, if you've ever felt like you were disappearing inside your own life, don't ignore that feeling. Share this story, speak your truth, and choose yourself before you forget how.